So, welcome everybody. We are the Pacific group, and we are going to be presenting on using awareness training to reduce nervous habits during a speech. And first, we're going to introduce ourselves. My name is Jenna Cahill, and I am a veterinary nurse turned animal behavior consultant, and I am in my 4th semester at Ball State.
My name is Trevor Dalton. I live in New Plymouth, Idaho, and I work for a local developmental disability agency with individuals ages 3 to 17. And I'm in my 2nd semester at Ball State.
Hello, my name is Daniel Sanchez. I'm in my 2nd semester at Ball State. I work with kids with autism. I'm a supervisor, and I am from the Bay Area.
My name is Angelina Troya. This is my 3rd semester at Ball State. I currently work as a behavior therapist with autistic children for a private company in Northern California.
Thanks, everybody. So we did our presentation on using awareness training to reduce nervous habits during public speaking. So why look at this? I'm going to go ahead and talk about the literature and why it's important to look at speech habits, what methods have typically been used to reduce speech anxiety, and then what other behavioral interventions we can use to reduce nervous habits during speech. So public speaking anxiety, or PSA, is a pretty prevalent issue with people. It affects 11 to 30% of the US population and affects how people interact in their daily lives, whether it's for school or work or in various other social situations. And as the famous comedian Jerry Seinfeld once put it, the number one fear of the average person is public speaking. Number 2 is death. And I quote, "If you show up at a funeral, you'd rather be in the casket than giving the speech." So it's a real issue with people, and it's a real important issue to look at. So now we're going to talk about some of the causes of the anxiety that people are having. So when people get anxious or nervous when they're giving a speech, it's usually for the following reasons. They feel that people are judging them. They wonder if they're doing a good job. They really want the people in the audience to like what they're saying, to be engaged with what they're saying, and they want people to believe them. They want people to think that they truly are an authority on what they're speaking about. And when people are listening to a speech, they are often looking for the speaker to be engaging. They want their speech to be eloquent, and they do. They want them to have authority about what they're speaking about and command the speaking. So that's kind of what people get nervous about. So what has been done to help people with speech anxiety? Well, a lot of the treatments come from the psychology discipline. So affect labeling, cognitive behavioral therapy, and attention modification are some of the things that have been used. And a lot of these techniques deal with feelings. They label the feelings that they're having. They identify threatening stimuli within their environment. They do continued exposure to giving speeches in the hopes of habituation and extinction of the feelings of anxiety they're having around the speech. But we can go ahead and take that a step further. We can actually look at the elements of speech itself to see what we can use to help reduce nervous habits during speech. So some of the elements of speech that we can look at have been classified as habits. These habits include filled pauses such as or tongue clicks, and misuse of the word like. A lot of times these types of habits have made people think that the person giving the speech has a lack of knowledge. They aren't commanding authority and superiority when they are giving their speeches if they're using these habits. And it shows a lack of preparedness or makes it seem like the person is unprepared to talk about what they're talking about. So now we're going to look at what can we do to modify speech habits. There have been several different techniques, one including habit reversal. And habit reversal includes 2 components. It includes a competing response training component and an awareness training component. And habit reversal has been used successfully to treat several different types of behaviors, including the speech habits we just talked about. Habit reversal has been used to treat angry outbursts in a 14-year-old boy during his tennis matches. It's been used to help reduce hair pulling in young adolescent girls. And it's also been it has helped a young child with Tourette's reduce the number of tics that he displayed. So the competing response training includes choosing a incompatible behavior to the behavior that they are displaying. So for example, with the angry outburst, the child was asked to take 3 deep breaths when he recognized he was getting angry. With the hair pulling, the girls were asked to sit on their hands or fold their hands in their laps. And with the speech habits, people were asked to pause for 3 seconds, or stick their tongue to the back of their teeth for tongue clicking, or to restart a sentence if they use the word like. The awareness training component of these studies includes just making people aware of the behaviors that they're performing. So they talk about the behaviors, they watch videos of the behaviors, and then they actually go into a real situation and identify those behaviors live. So with the Tourette's boy, they would talk about the different tics that he would have, and then during a 1-hour therapy session, he would try to identify those by himself. And every time he would do something, he would tell his therapist, oh, I just had an eye tic, or oh, I just had a face tic. And if he didn't identify those, then the behavior therapy person would actually identify them for him and then ask him if he realized that he was having one of the tics, and then just help him self-identify. And the more that people did this, the more they became aware of their behaviors. So habit reversal had a successful result with all of these people in reducing the behaviors that they displayed. So for the replication study that we chose to do, we actually chose a study that expanded on this research and looked at awareness training alone to see if awareness training by itself could actually reduce these nervous habits that were displayed during public speaking. So just a quick summary, 4 college students were chosen based on the fact that they wanted to improve their speech habits, either for conferences or for their careers. Their nervous habits were recorded and their rate per minute was documented. Then each participant went through awareness training, and then afterwards their habits were documented again per minute, and it was shown that awareness training alone had meaningfully reduced their nervous speech habits. So now I'm going to pass it off to Daniel, where he's going to expand on the replication study to talk about the methods and procedures that we used. Daniel?
The purpose of the study was to replicate the Steeler and Millenberg 2017 study and evaluate how effective awareness training alone was at reducing nervous habits in public speaking, which included field pauses, inappropriate use of the word like, and tongue clicks. Field pauses was defined as any sound or word, example, or where its use has no relation to the sentence. Tongue clicks were defined as a clicking sound emitted by the tongue of the speaker, which could be heard over the microphone on the computer. Inappropriate use of the word like was defined as using like in a sentence in which its inclusion did not follow correct syntactical, grammatical, or semantic form. Example, I had like 5 hours of sleep. He was like, no. Participants. There were 4 participants in the study, 2 females, Angelina and Gina, and 2 males, myself and Trevor, all of who attended a master's program at Ball State. All participants performed their speeches via an online application Zoom from the comfort of their homes. Methods. Our study can be split into 4 sections: baseline, awareness training, post-awareness training, and generality probe. Baseline. It's important to note that throughout all phases, we, the participants, but as we were also the principal investigator. So we would swap roles. So in baseline, the first step was for the PI to present 2 topics, 2 novel topics. Then the participant would choose their topic of preference and would be given up to 10 minutes to prepare a speech. Once the participant gave a notice that he or she was ready, they had to perform a 3 to 5 minute speech. Within the speech, the PI gave a 4-minute and 5-minute warning. Topics such as favorite place to live, favorite sport, worst childhood memory, 3 qualities you like in a person were one of the many topics. After At the conclusion of the speech, the PI rewatched the video of the speech later and measured the frequency of the target behaviors. The next phase was awareness training. Awareness training is composed of two sections: response description and detection of behaviors. So in response description, the PEI went over the purpose of the study and defined each target behavior, tongue clicks, unnecessary use of the word like, and filled in pauses such as or Then the PI showed the participant a baseline speech video and pointed out the occurrence of each target behavior. The next step of the awareness training was detection of behaviors. So in this step, the participant conducted a speech and had to raise their hand every time he or she engaged in one of the target behaviors. So for example, if I was giving a speech and I said the word I would have to raise my right hand. This process, the speech was conducted repeatedly until the participant identified 100% of the target behaviors. So once the participant identified 100% of the target behaviors, they were eligible to move to post-awareness training. And post-awareness training was the same as baseline phase. The purpose of the phase was to reduce our nervous habits by 80% of that of baseline. If a participant did not show an 80% reduction, the participant had to undergo a booster session. A booster session was a speech in which the participant had to raise their hand every time they engaged in one of the target behaviors, same as awareness training. Generality probe. This was the final stage of our study. All participants gathered together via Zoom and one by one presented a speech on a novel topic. Again, 2 topics were provided to the participant. The participant chose a topic, and 10 minutes were given to prepare for a 3 to 5 minute speech. This probe was conducted 1 week after the last participant from our study finished post-awareness training. IOA. IOA was obtained by dividing our speeches into 15-second intervals. A second observer watched the recorded speech and measured the occurrence of each target behavior. IOA was conducted for 33% of the intervals across all phases by using count per interval IOA. Our IOA was 81%. Treatment fidelity. Data on treatment fidelity was calculated for at least 33% of each phase of the study. Treatment fidelity was computed by swapping videos between groups and filling out the fidelity checklist that described the procedure of each phase step by step. Treatment fidelity for this study was 100%. Now, Angelina will discuss the results.
The results showed that awareness training was successful in reducing the amount of nervous speech habits for all 4 participants during their speeches. During baseline, Trevor had the highest frequency of likes, followed by filled pauses. The rest of the participants, Angelina, Daniel, and Gina, had the highest frequency of filled pauses during baseline and during post-AT assessment. All 4 participants showed at least an 80% decrease in the target behaviors during post-AT from baseline levels. Next, we have our data table, and I will discuss the data we collected. For baseline, all participants showed high levels of the target behaviors for an average of 6.19 per minute. For post-AT assessments, all 4 participants exhibited a decrease in nervous speech habits to an average of 1.09 per minute. 2 of the 4 participants, Angelina and Gina, needed 1 booster AT session each to achieve further reduction in the target behaviors. Daniel and Trevor did not need any booster AT sessions. Individual results were Angelina's nervous speech habits in baseline averaged 10.42 per minute and decreased to an average of 2.63 per minute in post-AT assessment. Daniel's nervous speech habits in baseline averaged 3.94 per minute and decreased to an average of 5.46 per minute in baseline, or in post-AT assessment, 0.3 per minute in the post-AT assessment. Trevor's nervous speech habits averaged 5.46 per minute in baseline and decreased to an average of 0.79 per minute in post-AT assessment. Lastly, Gina's nervous speech habits averaged 5 per minute in baseline and decreased to an average of 0.58 in post-AT assessment. For the generality probe, the data remains significantly below baseline levels for all 4 of the participants, and for 3 of the participants, the data was slightly increased from post-AT levels. Generality probe data was, Angelina's was 0.93 per minute. This was a decrease from baseline and from post-AT. Daniel's was 0.75 per minute, a decrease from baseline. Trevor's was 1.7 per minute, a decrease from baseline, and Gina's was 0.75 per minute, also a decrease from baseline. Daniel, Trevor, and Gina's generality probe data was a slight increase from their average post-AT levels. This next is the graph of all 4 participants. We used a multiple baseline design across participants, so we all started baseline at the same time and then entered intervention in a staggered manner. And I will now go through each participant's graph individually. First, we have Angelina's graph. Angelina was the first participant to enter our intervention phase, participating in 3 baseline sessions, so she was the first to enter the post-AT assessment. In baseline, she had high rates of the target behavior, and then in post-AT, there was a significant decrease in the target behaviors. After 1 post-AT assessment, she did not have an 80% reduction in the target behaviors from baseline, so she participated in 1 booster AT session, which led to a further reduction in her bad speech habits. For the generality probe, which is represented by the open circle data point, her rate was lower than her average baseline levels and lower than her average post-AT levels. Next is Daniel's graph. Daniel was the next participant to enter the post-AT assessment, participating in 5 baseline sessions. Daniel showed at least an 80% decrease from baseline and therefore did not need to participate in any booster AT sessions. His generality probe data was lower than his baseline levels, but slightly higher than his average post-AT assessment levels. Next, we have Trevor's graph. Trevor was the 3rd participant to enter post-AT assessment, participating in 6 baseline sessions. Trevor showed high levels of bad speech habits during baseline and showed at least an 80% decrease from baseline levels in the post-AT assessment, so Trevor also did not have to participate in any booster AT sessions. His generality probe data was lower than baseline, but again, slightly higher than his average post-AT levels. Last is Gina's graph. Gina was the last to enter post-AT, participating in 7 baseline sessions. Initially, she showed high levels of the target behavior in baseline and then showed a significant decrease in bad speech habits by at least 80% in her post-AT assessment. Then she had a small increase in bad speech habits during post-AT, so she participated in 1 booster AT session to achieve a further decrease in the target behaviors. Her generality probe data was significantly below baseline levels, but slightly higher than her average post-AT levels. So next, Trevor is going to discuss our IOA and treatment fidelity, as well as our discussion and conclusions for the project.
Thank you. So for this study, we used, when calculating IOA, there's a couple things you can notice. IOA was not used with awareness training because we did not collect data in awareness training, but that's okay. So in the following table, you can see I compiled a table that shows the total sessions and the total percentage of sessions that we calculated IOA for. You may notice that some of the numbers are not exactly really close to 33%. That is because we wanted to make sure that we did 33% of each individual's individual baseline phase or individual post-awareness phase. And since some of us were in longer, we did more with some than others. And so the numbers are a little bit not what you would think. We use the count per interval in order to replicate the study by Spuler and Miltenberger. It was a strict method, and it required trainings to review behavioral definitions in order to maintain 80%. When we fell under 80%, we would retrain and meet again. We calculated all the generality probes in order to make sure that we got 33% of all the participants. And it's interesting to note that we did go up a little bit with those generality probes after a week. But moving on to treatment fidelity, So like I said, we did not do IOA, but we did calculate treatment fidelity across all of these different sessions, even the ones that did not include data collection. One of the reasons why we had such high treatment fidelity is because we had printed out a checklist or a procedural checklist that we followed when we would go through our videos as we were exchanging. Going through those steps, which giving the 2 topics, giving the 10 minutes to prepare, having a red piece of paper for the 5 minutes, having a white piece of paper for the 4-minute mark, and to be able to make sure that we were achieving 100% fidelity. The following table shows the total number of sessions that treatment fidelity was calculated for. And so for baseline, we exchanged 8 videos and calculated treatment fidelity. For awareness training, we exchanged 4 total. For post-awareness training, 8 out of the 18. And for booster sessions, we did 2, one for Angelina and one for Gina. For generality probe, we did all. Some of the limitations of this project, obviously, the participants were not blind to the purpose and the methods as we were implementing the study on ourselves. This might lead to some awareness of what is expected and maybe some bias in the data. Video calls over Zoom, as great as Zoom was, did make it sometimes difficult to accurately identify tongue clicks. So maybe that is part of the reason why there is not a ton of tongue clicks, but we did our best to train and to consistently identify those tongue clicks when they were clearly identifiable. Participants may have gotten comfortable with the PI in comparison to a designated research assistant. We feel like it could definitely skew our data because we were getting a repertoire with our partner, and that would help ease the nervous habits. We did discover in scoring IOA that sometimes we would have discrepancies due to our personal use of timers for data collection. Sometimes we would find that one single behavior was in consecutive intervals between 2 independent observers, and that lowered IOA every once in a while. Some of the strengths of this were definitely the IOA being 81% using count per interval IOA. We are really proud of that fact, and we trained consistently, and we tried to make sure that we were being very accurate with our data collection. Treatment fidelity score of 100%, thanks to using those treatment fidelity checklists, having them printed out next to us as we did all of the implementation with baseline, with awareness training. We credit that for helping us a lot and being prepared and ready to go. This study showed that speech habits can be learned and maintained, confirming the findings of Spuler and Miltenberger. Every participant reached an 80% reduction in nervous habits over the course of the projects from levels in baseline. Generality probes showed that even after a week, that we still were close to those improved reduction levels. It's interesting to note that it went up if we weren't continuing to practice these things, and we're doing a presentation that the whole class is going to watch, and maybe our nervous habits are going to go up because there is a bigger audience and there's more at stake here. But in conclusion, our findings were consistent with the findings of Spuler and Mittenberger. Awareness training increased the awareness of our nervous habits, when they happened, how they happened, what were our personal habits surrounding those things. And that awareness created the opportunity for us to create our own replacement behaviors. We started to take long silent pauses instead of use ums. Or I personally would try to avoid use of similes and things that I fall into using like inappropriately. Everyone began to realize their patterns of behavior and being able to avoid those nervous habits. Awareness training was found to be an effective intervention at correcting nervous habits. This habit reversal could be taken and applied in many other situations. Thank you.